Harry and Meghan are raging after learning that their £2.4 million renovation of Frogmore Cottage is being ripped out, chucked in a skip, and the place is being turned back into grotty staff accommodation it once was after standing empty for 3 scandalous years. King Charles waited until after the Queen died to kick them out because she would have blocked his move because Frogmore Cottage was her wedding gift to them. Well, much like Frogmore Cottage itself, the Sussexes are gutted. But are they playing dumb? Could Harry really expect Prince William to have neighbours who said his wife was a racist B1TCH? Yes. Well, hello and welcome back to another fantastic episode of The Royalist. I'm Tom Sykes, and I can't wait for us to jump into today's episode. But before I do, please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and recommend me to at least one friend if you can. I also want to thank you for all your amazing comments. As you know, I like to join the live chat, so I do read them very closely. I use them to generate ideas of things you want me to cover. You're like my own personal focus group. So I want to point out some of my faves from the last episode and give you some hints about what today's show is going to be about. And I'm also secretly hoping that this will incentivize you to keep your comments coming. So Alexandra Fingleton, who, as we know, is our unofficial greeter on the YouTube channel, said, I wonder what Harriet will wear. She means to the wedding. We will need Plum. Indeed, I am hoping to get Plum for that. As I've explained, she's a tough woman to book, even if you do happen to be her brother. Hoof Care comment actually inspired one of the items that we're doing today, since you would love to know more about the guest list for Peter and Harriet's wedding. Well, don't worry, Hoof Care. We're going to get to that later. And look after your hooves, won't you? And lastly, our old friend Teacup Demitas said Meghan wanted Windsor Castle. She wouldn't have accepted the lesser royal lodge. Well, Teacup, just wait till you hear my exclusive later on this episode about Meghan and Harry's latest property-related outburst. So if you too want to have one of your comments shared, don't forget to comment below. You've got to be in it to win it. And pro tip, compliments are encouraged and try and be funny. So now let's jump into today's incredible show with our royal rundown. First up, feud news. Why Charles can't stop undermining his son and heir. Then it's time for our Royal Insider, and this week we have Alison Boshoff, and it's a wedding special. We're going to be talking all about the secrets of Princess Anne's son's upcoming, highly dysfunctional royal wedding. Then the Andrew update. Well, another day, another 30,000 emails revealed. You know how it goes. Well, what is Andrew saying? And why did the king ignore them? And finally, our royal exclusive. Harry and Meghan, I can exclusively reveal, are raging that the £2.4 million makeover of Frogmore Cottage is being ripped out. I wonder why the royals didn't want them living next door. Right, let's get into it. First up, it's feud news. I want to dig a bit further into the central story at the heart of the monarchy right now. It's not Andrew, it's not really Harry, it's not really weddings, it's the war between the king and his heir. Everything that we're talking about at the moment, whether it's who comes to a wedding, who shows up at Ascot, who gets to keep a title, who doesn't get to keep a title, where you live, what happens to your house, it's all downstream of one fundamental disagreement. And that is a disagreement between Charles and William about what the monarchy is for and how you protect it and how you represent it. So there was a fascinating piece in the Mail over the weekend that I talked about in greater detail in a YouTube video that I did over the weekend that people really enjoyed, but it is very long So I'm going to try and give you a sort of slightly abbreviated version of it here. It was by Barbara Davis, who's a kind of classic male feature, Daily Mail feature writer. It was about this band of friends who joined William for the Aston Villa game in Istanbul. And it was, it was brilliantly done. There were all the details that you want. The fact that William grows a fake moustache when he goes out with the boys and wears a pair of silly glasses and puts on a dodgy Welsh accent and all of this. But when you actually read between the lines, the piece was actually a hit job dressed up as a hagiography, because even in the sub headline it was saying why royal aides are concerned, about William's hidden blokish ways. And the is you have to understand a little bit about what the British legacy media can't report honestly on the argument and the feud between William and Charles. And it's something that I've written about a lot in my Substack, because it's the foundational mythos of the royal family at the moment. And it's very hard to understand what's actually going on unless you know all these insider details. For example, the fact that Tobin Andre, the king's chief communications man, until 2 years ago, was a former senior editor at the Daily Mail. I mean, he only missed out on the editor-in-chief's position by a whisker, I am told. And so it's interesting to see the Mail taking up this line and picking up this line that has often been used to beat William and Catherine, that he's lazy, that he's work shy, that he doesn't do as many engagements as his dad. And this is trotted out now every year, isn't it? That the king, even though he's got cancer, has done over 500 engagements and William's only done 202 or whatever it is, And the point is that William's court just say, look, if he wanted to stuff his diary with 8 different engagements on a day, including going to church, like sometimes when Charles goes to church, he counts it as an engagement because it goes in the court circular. So William's team just say, look, this is complete nonsense. He sees the job differently. He disdains this performative monarchy, this sort of appearance counting. You can't compare a 10-year environmental prize called Earthshot with one line in the Times about what, showing up for this, that, or the other event. And the thing that I find so fascinating about it, I think what drives Charles's team absolutely crackers, is that despite the patina of actually being king, and despite this kind of never-ending tour of every town hall in the country, sometimes the king's approval record it's a record high for him, but it's only around 60%. Now, of course, any politician would kill for that, but compare it to William and Catherine's, they outstrip him by a mile. They're in the late 70s. And I think the difference is that William and Catherine understand that they need to meet their audience in a very different way these days. They understand that their audience isn't, frankly, waiting for them in the town square in Leicester. Their audience is online. They have this very smart guy who runs their press operation, this guy called Lee Thompson, who's a kind of digital whiz kid, worked for places like NBC, really understands, that this is what they need to do. And it's interesting as well, like William, after he appeared at that football match, which was obviously a private trip, and I think we got a lovely glimpse at that match, didn't we, into that kind of compartmentalized secret world that is the real William. I feel like we don't see much of the real William, and I feel like we saw him there jumping up and down and cheering and messing around with his mates. And I think that what's so extraordinary is that all this stuff just completely connects with the public. The public just don't buy this line that comes out of the palace saying that, duty has to come first, that you should do 500 things, that you should leave your kids to go on tour, that you should, all these kinds of things. They like the idea of William and Catherine loading their own dishwasher, cooking their own food, laying a table. And look, I have friends whose children are at school with the Wales kids, and one really funny story that I was told by one parent. They said to me, they're like caricatures of middle class parents. I went to a house for a kid's birthday party, and they were the ones organizing the games and playing rounders. Any of us lot would get an entertainer in and sit in the house drinking rosé. So I love that, that they're almost sort of absolutely attached to the children. It's all about the children. It's all about raising the children so that they're not traumatized, and that they're not messed up, that they're not screwed up. Because to be fair, like if you look at how the Queen raised her children, that didn't work out brilliantly, to be totally honest, with, as we're seeing the fallout with Andrew now. And if you look at how Charles raised his children, they've both complained, some more publicly than others, about feeling that their father was very distant. I mean, we know, for example, Tina Brown famously reported that Charles played polo the afternoon Harry was born. So William and Kate have really moved in the opposite direction. There is, of course, the Harry and Andrew thing does massively come into it. And the reality is that William has always said for a long time, they need to be absolutely expelled from the family. They need to be absolutely cut out of their family, them and all their heirs, I'm told. Um, and Charles has obviously been much more conciliatory, tried to kind of mend it, tried for years to rehabilitate Andrew, now very much denied by the palace, by the way. Now it's all the Queen's fault. But those of us who actually were paying attention will recall that Charles went to great efforts to try and rehabilitate Andrew. And William just basically, I've been told, just feels that Charles is just making the same mistake all over again with Harry. And he feels that Harry's betrayal, particularly, this allegation that Catherine asked bigoted questions about a child's skin colour, particularly this allegation that Catherine asked bigoted questions about, a child's potential skin color that came out in the Omid Scobie book that was then pulped. He thinks it's unforgivable, and he thinks that Andrew's rehabilitation was an incredibly bad idea. He thinks that he's been completely vindicated by what's happened between Andrew Loney and the Epstein files, and that once you're out, you're out. And that's the real dynamic now at the center of the monarchy. And as I am very much looking forward to seeing how this all plays out on Saturday, when we do have one of these brilliant set pieces of this wedding. So it's going to be one to watch. And right now, I think that William, when it comes to the feud, William is winning. Okay, and up next we have our Royal Insider. Well, there is nothing that the Royalist enjoys more than a royal wedding. And I do seem to remember being hunched round a black and white television to watch the wedding of Prince Charles and Princess Diana. But I couldn't be, it must just be a figment of my imagination, because I think even we had a colour TV at that stage. But this weekend, we are all very excited about it's a sort of royal wedding. It's going to have to do between Peter Phillips, who is the late Queen Elizabeth's first grandchild, and the son of Princess Anne, of course, famously no-nonsense Princess Anne, who is on his second marriage, and he's marrying Harriet Spurling, also on her second marriage. And to join me to discuss this splendiferous event is the one and only Alison Boshoff. Alison, you've written a really interesting piece about this wedding in your Substack, and you're kind of making the point that this wedding, it's a kind of X-ray of the state of the family right now, the guest list, isn't it? What are you going to be looking out for, and what do you think it's going to tell us?
Well, it will tell us very obviously who is out by who does and doesn't come. Right? You're not going to come if you haven't been invited. So no Harry, no Meghan, no Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, no Fergie. So that's your two sets of no thank yous.
Yes, exactly. And the big question, though, isn't it, is are we going to see Beatrice and Eugenie there? Because originally we were very much told that they were coming. Then I was told last weekend, after all the Prince Andrew stuff resurfaced with this allegation of him behaving inappropriately. We don't know the details, but he appears to have done something at Royal Ascot in 2002 that perhaps they might not come. But then this weekend, we've seen Eugenie posting pictures on her social media of her kid Ernest, sort of suggesting that maybe they do want to stay in the public eye. What's your feeling? I mean, obviously, we can't predict whether or not they're going to come or not, but I mean, they have been invited. We know that, and they have said that they will come originally. What does it tell us if they do come, and what does it tell us if they don't come?
I would almost be surprised if they don't come, because I think that they are the cousins have a friendly genuine relationship, and I think they have RSVP'd yes, as far as I can work out, and I don't think they've then gone back and at least not formally RSVP'd no. So, and I think they'll be in a room with a lot of people who like them and enjoy their company and whose company they enjoy. So, Princess Anne is not, I mean, she's a really scary person by all accounts, but I don't think she's very judgmental. She's one of the only people who has spent time with her brother, the former Prince Andrew, since his disgrace. And that says something, doesn't it? That's a strong person who is going to do what she thinks is right. Doesn't really matter to her how it looks. So I could see her extending a hand to his children, because it's not their disgrace, is it? It's the parents' disgrace. And what's not to love about a country wedding? And most of it will be taking part behind closed doors, away from the cameras. It's in Gatcombe Park, which is her estate, privately owned, and they will be entirely private there.
Right. So quite a bit can happen, as you say, behind closed doors. We'll probably see the arrivals at the church. Obviously, that'll be public. But there won't be being photographs of the party at Gatcombe Park, will there, this year, Alison? And you were writing very fascinatingly about Peter has some form here, because whilst Peter is lately being held up as the great icon of how understated non-working members of the royal family should be, he's done a bit of trading on the old royal name himself in the past, hasn't he?
He put his size 10s right in it, didn't he? In 2008 when he had his first wedding. And I was astonished that it was a Hello Magazine deal. I remember I was a junior reporter at the time, and I was writing about the wedding because it was coming up that weekend. And I was speaking to someone who was involved in the wedding, and I didn't think to ask this person, was it a hello or okay deal, which at the time were at their absolute height, because I just couldn't imagine that it would be. So yeah, there was my surprise come Monday when out comes hello, 100-page special. This was the era of print. They knew how to do it. 100-page special of the young royals at play, and it was William and Kate Middleton, as she was 3 years before their wedding, long before their engagement. Prince Harry and Chelsea Davy dancing, cutting a rug on the dance floor. Prince Harry kind of looking like he was about to pinch Chelsea Davy's backside. I mean, incredible, a sort of unvarnished royals at play pictures. I don't think we've ever seen anything like it, before or after.
And of course, you can see a lot of those pictures on Alison's Substack. We're not going to repeat them here because we're more fearful of copyright than Boshoff is. But fair use, I think, covers it, doesn't it, Alison? But it was an extraordinary moment. I mean, I do just want to remind people. So Peter, when he married his first wife, Autumn, I think she was called, wasn't she? And they sold all of the photographs to Hello Magazine for £500,000, which was quite a lot of money at that time. It was almost as shocking as when we heard that Meghan was making a reality TV show. I mean, people were horrified and aghast. And I think that perhaps members of the royal family understood that some photographs were going to be published. But I think when the 100-page spread came out of Harry and Chelsea dancing, I mean, Harry was said to be absolutely furious, right?
Yeah, of course. Well, of course you'd feel so betrayed. I mean, I think what they understood was that there was a photographer taking pictures and that some pictures would go in hello. And I guess they imagined those would be, we all have the boring wedding album, don't we? Where, you're all lined up outside the church and you do a series of lineups, bride and groom, bride's family, bride and groom, groom's family, all the bridesmaids together, etc. That would have been fine, I think. But, they went way, way further than that. And actually, interestingly, and I've totally forgotten until I was looking at it, that wedding reception was at Frogmore, just like Harry and Meghan's. And that was the gift of the Queen to Peter Phillips. That was like her wedding gift to him was, use Frogmore.
So irony, no shortage of ironies. Prince Harry complaining that people were monetizing him, photographs and film, and Frogmore, yeah, an amazing detail. I suppose Peter can't sell his wedding this time round, could he?
I just think the whole landscape has changed totally. I mean, firstly, those big deals just don't exist anymore. The magazines don't have those budgets. So, even if the money would have been tempting. But second, I just don't think he could. But what I was told was that because of what's happened with Harry, and because of all those, that bad feeling that these exploitations have had, this, people feeling exploited, that it's just now considered totally beyond the pale to do a deal like that. So it just wouldn't be able to happen. And, the person I was speaking to said, you don't want to get on the wrong side of the Princess Royal. And we can all agree with that.
You definitely don't want to get on the wrong side, especially if you're a horse, I imagine.
Yeah, you're liable to get a slap on the rump, I think, whether you're a horse or a human.
So let's talk a little bit about, so obviously Beatrice and Eugenie, there's going to be a lot of speculation, a lot of interest to see whether that happens. So what I was told was that they are reconsidering, that they were left mortified by the latest revelations about their father, that they're nervous about overshadowing the bride and groom's happy day. You think that probably, in a way, do you think it might be less of a fuss if they do show up? Is that kind of your point?
It could be, couldn't it? I mean, my conundrum, to which I don't know the answer yet, is the king going to go? Because Epsom have confirmed that he's going to be at Derby Day, and that race is at 4 p.m. And I know when the wedding is, ish, and it will be a stretch. So we'll see. Then, them attending or not attending might not be the only story in town. And, I think people aren't that excited by Beatrice and Eugenie, honestly, and they have shown that it will be a different kettle of fish, wouldn't it, if they had been popping up to see Daddy every weekend and supporting their mother in public and supporting both their parents. And you can make actually a really good argument for saying that this is actually what they should have been doing. But they haven't. They've steered so clear of their radioactive parents, but they could go and it wouldn't be seen as kind of bringing their parents in to the church with them. Do you know what I mean? I don't feel like they'd be trailing their parents too much. I think there's a lot of brand separation there.
I just felt that William was clearly so uncomfortable being alongside them at Christmas at Sandringham, and we saw whenever they tried to come over and speak to him, he suddenly found his scarf absolutely fascinating, which led to this wonderful neologism on social media saying you've been scarfed, which is when Prince William looks at his scarf rather than talking to you. But I suppose in a sense, Beatrice and Eugenie are, they occupied a very different social lane, right, to William when they were growing up. They were with a sort of different set. Although William was instrumental in introducing Dave Clark to Beatrice, because if I've got this correct, Dave was doing a study year abroad at Edinburgh when William was at St Andrews, and I believe that he was instrumental in introducing them. But they've sort of fundamentally occupied a very different kind of social circle, social strata. And I feel that Eugenie, in particular, really blotted her copybook with William when she went out to stay with Harry and Meghan, when she lived in their house at Frogmore Cottage, when she was photographed with them. I mean, I take your point about the king not showing up, but I actually am going to be more interested to see if William shows up, if Beatrice and Eugenie do show up. I think for me, that'll be the really interesting dynamic to watch.
Wow. I mean, that's serious politics, isn't it, within the royal family being played out at this wedding? I feel very sorry for the bride and groom. It is meant to be about them.
Yes, indeed. And I think the other thing that I am told is that, and you have to forgive me, despite the fact I've been reporting about royals for 20 years, I still, like everybody else on the planet, get them confused. And the only thing I can ever remember is that Eugenie is the younger one, but oddly, she got married first. But Beatrice, no, Eugenie, at Eugenie's wedding, was that where Meghan annoyed them by telling people that she was pregnant? Do you remember that?
That is, and when we finish this broadcast, I'm going to tell you the brilliant way to always remember how to tell them apart, but it's slightly rude. So we'll have to do that off camera.
I'm really looking forward to hearing that. We would like your suggestions for what that is in the comments below, please. And we'll leave the community moderators to decide what's appropriate and what is not. I just think it's a really, I think that also between this and Ascot, I think it's going to be a really interesting signpost about what the future holds for the girls, particularly what this summer holds. And I know I shouldn't call them the girls, for the princesses, what it holds for them, because Charles has been pretty consistently right that he wants to see them rehabilitated. We saw when he made his statement about Andrew having all his titles removed, that Beatrice and Eugenie were going to be, I think the words were, completely unaffected. But I'm told that William sees it very differently. He thinks that they're contaminated by the association, and he thinks that in the age of the social media pile-on, as unfair as that may be, they're best avoided.
Yeah, and this is so fascinating. I think you've really led the way on us totally, Tom, is this conflict between, at its heart, it's conflict between King Charles and how he wants to do it, and William and how he wants to do it. If it was down to William, those girls would be expunged just like their parents. And if it's down to Charles, it will be business as normal, as you saw at Sandringham. So yes, this is fascinating. It's a fascinating conflict between these two power players. And, is anyone going to cede way, or is it just going to be a clash?
Well, I guess we will find out on Saturday which way the worm has turned. So, Alison, I wanted to talk to you about Meghan and fashion, because you've done a really deep dive into One-Off, this fashion platform that she's either invested in or supporting. We don't know the exact terms of the deal, but your headline finding is pretty tough, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I thought it was time to, she announced it when they were off in Australia, that she was an investor and she was also going to participate in this platform that sells clothes. You could sort of like a shop my look, but for fancy people. And she did 2 drops on the 15th of April, 3 on the 16th, 2 on the 17th. Then it went totally dark. Then she popped up again in 6 posts on 6 outfits on May the 11th. And I thought, well, we've had probably long enough to see, how these are selling. There's quite a lot there, isn't there? And the answer is not much. I've thought it was interesting what she picked to put on it, especially sort of going back into looks. And a lot of it were not terribly high end. So, I mean, I would consider them fancy, but, jeans for $250, that sort of thing. It's not designer. No single trouser that this woman has ever worn has sold out on the platform. I leave it there.
Right.
There are really, really vanishingly small sellouts. I think I counted 4 in about 80 items. And some of them were things like the Oscar de la Renta halter neck top that she wore. Well, Oscar de la Renta probably only made like a dozen of them. So, not him personally, his company. So he's dead. That's not difficult to sell out. And in fact, it could have been sold out by the time she posted it quite easily, because that's the way these things work. So that doesn't speak to tremendous selling power. Or is it just that this platform isn't up to much, doesn't have much traffic? Or is the problem the way she's posting on it, or is it what she's posting on it? I mean, you look at some of the other people on the platform, and they are very much sort of high fashion influencers. So you've got models like Suki Waterhouse or Emma Chamberlain, and they're posting much more frequently than she is. And all of their outfits are current and designer. So you've got this season's McQueen. Meghan seems to have not understood the brief, and she's posted an outfit that's by Victoria Beckham. She wore it 3 years ago. And it says the shirt is sold out. Well, I should bloody well hope the shirt's sold out. You know, Victoria Beckham would have had it on sale within 6 months, and then it's dead stock. I mean, yes, of course it's not being sold anymore. So that's someone who doesn't understand the fashion business, with a B, you know, the business end of it. She doesn't seem to understand that. I don't know who's advising her. I don't know. I cannot quite understand what the strategy is. I mean, I presume that the people who run this platform have advised her what she should put on there. But anyway, what's to say is it is not, doesn't show any signs of taking off. And you might, before you say, oh, but no one's selling out. I did find an outfit worn by Olivia Palermo, and the whole thing was sold out. And the jacket was like $900. So, you know, things that are put on there, expensive things by aspirational people, do sell out. And at the moment, the way it looks, although I haven't seen her financials, is that Meghan's not selling clothes.
It's a really interesting point you make that you said she doesn't seem to have understood the brief, and that she's just posting really irregularly. I mean, as Rachel, my producer, frequently tells me, the whole key to making it work, whether on YouTube or Instagram, and lots of the viewers to this channel, you know, everybody has their channel monetized now. Your Substack, right? Your first thing you're told is make sure it's regular. Make sure you're setting an appointment for people to turn up. So every Monday, just post a new thing. Like, it seems like the usual kind of Meghan chaos. Like, grab a huge bucket of mud, randomly throw a load of stuff at the wall, walk away for a bit, see what sticks, come back, chuck some more at the wall, see what sticks, and then be sort of surprised that it doesn't seem to be working. I mean, it's just so chaotic, isn't it?
It is chaotic. And, you know, nobody else posts, and I had a look at their grid, no one else posts 6 things in a day. They post one thing, then they leave it a couple of days, then they post another thing, so that you're popping up frequently. So the people who are visiting the site think, oh, that's a nice look. Oh, that's, you know, that's interesting. Nobody posts 6 things in a day and then nothing for a month. That's to misunderstand how it works. So, I mean, I would say with my charitable soft heart, Tom, and I do have one, I think that the engagement that this woman gets is so insane. The global attention she brings to anything new she does is such that she just hasn't had to understand, like the rest of us who flog up and like me think, ugh, it's Wednesday, I don't feel like posting again. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it anyway. She's never had to do that. So she's never really been a content creator in the modern sense, because for those crucial years when she would have been learning it, she was off, you know, having on her worldwide privacy tour in Vancouver and Montecito. And, you know, every time she stepped a tiny toe out, everyone lost their minds. So now things have calmed down and she actually needs to act like a successful influencer. She seems to lack the roadmap.
Fascinating. And as you say, there was that she does have this ability to generate heat, I suppose you might put it. And you actually have some detail from Crunchbase, which is one of these data set analyzing companies, that shows that the heat index goes through the roof when she's in Australia, but is attention and sales, right, are two very different things. I mean, sure, people want to check out the thing, but it looks like, were people actually buying them? It looks like they weren't, right? I mean, it's obviously it's not a transparent thing going, you've sold tick 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 this many, although that might be an idea, actually, one off, maybe gamify your sales. But I mean, that's the point, isn't it, is that attention and sales are really, really different. And I often think this about their production company. I think, how could Netflix obviously didn't confuse the fact that the fact they got lots of attention would mean they were going to make great TV. I mean, they might have confused that in themselves, but attention and sales are not necessarily related, are they?
No, exactly. And also the attention it's the unwashed masses like you and I, sorry. And the people who are going to buy Meghan's, $5,000 dress are not the people who read about Meghan in the media and then go and click out of curiosity to see it. They don't have $5,000 to spend on a dress. And I'm not convinced they have $13 to spend on jam or $64 to spend on a candle. I think that she has uh, wafted too far free from her uh, attainable, aspirational fan base, and she does have a fan base. I mean, I know she has also an equally large community of haters, but she does have a fan base. But she's floated too far up, and it's like she thinks she's Gwyneth Paltrow, who can sell $900 dresses and jackets to people, but Meghan can't. I think Meghan can probably sell you jam for $13, but I think the people who are into Meghan would take fright at $500 for a shirt. It's just too much money.
I think you are right. She's got one-off, where 4 out of 80 items have sold out. As ever, who knows? They say they've sold 50 million pots of jam. Other people have their doubts. Netflix don't seem particularly excited about doing any massive deals with them, like lots of stuff in production, nothing in development, not moving on to the production slate. I mean, is it a viable business, this whole brand, this whole Meghan brand? Do you think it is a viable lifestyle brand, or do you think ultimately there's going to be a sad announcement in 6 months or a year or 18 months' time?
I think lifestyle brands are so difficult. And I think, it's very rare to be able to launch and sustain one. And I think with Meghan, a lot of people stepped into the lifestyle space, like Meghan's chum, Chrissy Teigen, and then had to kind of take little steps back again because they found that, yes, they could sell a recipe book, or you might be able to sell some biscuit mixes, but that doesn't then sustain into a whole universe. So I suspect what Meghan's going to find when she sits down with, please God, a business advisor who actually looks at the financials and helps her, is somebody needs to say to her, like very much like David Belhassan, the investor, said to Victoria Beckham, do this, stop doing that. So I think it's going to be pruned. And I think the bit that works, she needs to concentrate on, and that will be something that's authentic to her, that people actually believe she does. I don't think people believe in her as a cook, as a recipe writer, as a foodie. I mean, she enjoys eating food, but nobody really thinks she's particularly great at making food. Having watched all of that series, you don't come away thinking, wow, I wish I had the Duchess of Sussex's knife skills. No. I believe, what I believe in her? I believe in her as someone who lives a nice life and enjoys a glass of wine. That, I think, is the bit of the business that works. Also, you know what? Wine has a really long shelf life. So if you end up with a load of dead stock, it's not an issue. That jam, man, that's got to be sold. It's going to be going green soon.
Well, there's a business plan. Get into wine because it gets better with age. Alison, rather like myself. Alison, always a pleasure to have you here. Links to all of Alison's pieces in the show notes before. As I said, Alison's got a new Substack. Please subscribe to her Substack, show your support, and that way we can keep her coming on this show. Thank you so much, Alison.
Love you, Tom. See you soon.
Now it's time for our Andrew update. I think most people have made their minds up about what Andrew did, about how he behaved. That's no longer really in dispute. The question now, and it's a much bigger, much more dangerous question for the monarchy, is what did the palace know and when did they know it? And specifically, what did King Charles know and how much did he know before he signed off on that $14 million payment to Virginia Giuffre while the Queen was dying? Well, over the weekend, we learn a bit more about what Charles may have known at that time. And I don't think it'll come as a huge surprise to anyone who's followed my reporting, who's read Andrew Loney's book, who's been covering other reporting on this whole affair, that court documents reveal that an archive of 30 1,000 emails relating to Andrew's financial dealings were handed to the Lord Chamberlain's office in 2020, 6 years ago. It's not rumors, it's not whispers, it's not gossip. It was a physical archive of 30,000 emails. So they were thrown up in a legal dispute, as some of this intriguingly, so much stuff with Andrew has been thrown up as sort of collateral damage of other legal disputes, and they cover a lot of Andrew's relationship with the Rowland banking family. And of course, you, my clever, intelligent, educated audience, will know that it was the Rowlands to whom Andrew sent that letter saying that email saying 50K each to the girls. Do you remember that one? Jellybook and all of that? Well, same people. And they also were the beneficiaries of Andrew's sharing information about the bailout of the Icelandic banks. We remember the banking crisis, of course, and they were purchasing, they'd taken over the Luxembourg arm of a failed Icelandic bank. So this was very, very relevant information for them and might make sense of why Andrew felt able to confidently order them to deposit 50 grand in the accounts of his children. Um, Look, the Epstein files released earlier this year obviously show us how close Andrew was to the Rowlands. He was promoting Rowland's banking ventures to Epstein. He was saying that he was seeking high net worth individuals, So there is no shortage of suggestion that the idea that this came as a huge shock to King Charles when it was all suddenly revealed in the Epstein files last year. I mean, it just makes a complete mockery of that argument. Now, of course, our American audience this will have overtones of the whole Watergate affair. And what happened in the Watergate affair, we'll remember, it wasn't in the end about that burglary or bugging or anything like that. It was about people using the institutions of power to cover up crime, to cover up stuff that was inconvenient to them. And I think these questions, sadly, in the state of the British judicial system, the state of the British media, sadly, I just don't think these questions are really probably ever going to be asked of King Charles outside of more independent media, such as the Royalist or the Daily Beast. We're able to report on this without quite so much fear. Were these emails reviewed? Were they passed to the authorities? Were they buried? What happened to those emails that were passed them, which incidentally were also highlighted by the Mail on Sunday at the time 6 years ago. So this is the black hole of scandals, really. It just keeps widening and widening. Thames Valley Police now saying they've expanded their inquiry beyond misconduct in public office to include potential sexual offences. We've heard about this waitress at Royal Ascot in 2002, the Golden Jubilee year, has accused Andrew of inappropriate behaviour. Thames Valley Police obviously say they can't comment. Buckingham Palace says they can't comment. Everyone says they can't comment. Well, I think that the reality is that I've spoken to Andrew Loney about this as well, and he agrees with me that it is vanishingly unlikely that Andrew is going to be charged. I think it's very, very unlikely that he'll ever see the inside of a courtroom. And I think there's almost zero prospect that he'll ever see the inside of a jail cell. And the reason I think that, it comes back to the Paul Burrell defense. If you told the sovereign something and the sovereign said it was okay, what are you, or if you claim that you told the sovereign something, what are you going to do? You're going to call the king to testify in a magistrate's court in Norfolk? I mean, it's a constitutional nightmare for the royals, the Andrew problem. And it just keeps getting worse because I think this is not going to end up in court. I would almost I would bet a lot on it that it's not going to end up in court. I could be wrong. I'd love to be proved wrong on it. But I fear that it's not, because the royals, they have form when this stuff happens. They circle the wagons and shoot any outsiders who happen to be approaching, So we will have to obviously wait and see. And let's hope that Thames Valley Police do come up with something. But it seems a bit lame if all they've managed to get so far as a waitress at Royal Ascot, which is a public event, right? Saying that something happened to her in 2002. I don't know. It doesn't fill me with confidence. And I think the fact that they knew about the allegations that he was passing information, basically a form of insider dealing, right? Insider information that was commercially sensitive. If they knew that 6 years ago and they did nothing about it 6 years ago, I think this shows you their first instinct all along has been to hide, to protect Andrew, and to cover their own asses. Okay, and now we have our grand finale, our royal exclusive. Harry and Meghan are spitting with fury about the fate of Frogmore Cottage. Now, if you've been following this story, you'll be aware that it was reported last week that their £2.4 million renovation of Frogmore Cottage is basically being undone. All of the Soho House appliances and fittings are being stripped out, and the property, having stood empty scandalously for 3 years at, they say, a cost of over $500,000, is now being converted back into staff accommodation, which is what it was before Harry and Meghan moved in. So this renovation was originally paid for by the taxpayer because Frogmore Cottage was supposed to be their official home and they were going to be working members of the royal family. As we know, that didn't pan out. When they left, they paid that money back, and they say that that was on the understanding that they would still be able to live there, because they are saying to me it was a wedding present from the Queen. Sources in their camp also say that they were paying full market rent. Um, just to put this in context, I mean, they have been mightily cheesed off about this for years, and they're now basically doubling down on the issue. I get the sense that they're trying to ride a wave of popular fury about the royal family's incredibly wasteful and excessive property holdings, which I actually did a bigger YouTube on last week. Do have a look at my channel if you're interested in hearing more about that. They are basically now also making a really incendiary claim that they were evicted from Frogmore Cottage before Spare was published. Because you may remember, well, at least the decision was made before Spare was published. They're saying that the decision was made that they were informed of the wish to evict them even before the Netflix documentary came out. But this is a really fascinating new claim from their side, because, of course, we always understood that Harry and Meghan were kicked out in revenge for Spare. Now, they're not saying on anything on the record, their side are not saying on the record, but the background information that I am getting is that this decision, or the request for them to leave, was being made and in progress before the Netflix film screened, before Spare done. And therefore, they're saying that it wasn't done in response to anything. It was done to punish them for their original sin. And we've heard this before, haven't we? That the royal family wanted to punish them for leaving the royal family, wanted to put pressure on them not to leave. Now, we've seen this narrative from the Sussex camp around security. And I'd like to have a think about where it holds up and where it doesn't. Well, the first thing to say is that if the eviction decision was made after the Queen's death, because one of the other things that their camp are saying is that the Queen would never have sanctioned this, that she wanted them to keep the house. So again, this very emotive evoking of, well, this is what the Queen would have wanted, slightly reminiscent of when Harry came over, saw the Queen, and then told interviewers that he was just checking she had the right people around her. Do you remember that one? But if this eviction decision was made after the Queen's death, then that means it was made after the Oprah interview. So fair enough, it may have been made before the Netflix film, but it was made after the Oprah interview. You remember the one, right? You remember the one in which Meghan and Harry said that the royals had asked prejudiced, bigoted questions about their unborn children's potential skin color. They said that they wouldn't name this person or these people. It later turned out to be the King and Catherine. That was briefed to Omid Scobie, who included it in a book, which was subsequently pulped, but I don't think anyone's ever seriously contested that's who it was. So I think putting this in context, if this decision was made after the Oprah interview, which, to be fair, the Queen reacted to pretty strongly for her, with recollections may vary, that famous statement. And in fact, it remains the only thing that the royal family have said on the record in rebuttal of Harry and Meghan's various claims. But if it happened after the interview, when we knew the Netflix deal was in place, when we knew the book deal was in place, and the royals could have seen, I think, that the direction of travel of where this was going to end up was pretty clear. So, in the palace's defense, I have gone to them for comment. They haven't responded. I think the argument would be, how could we have these two people who had betrayed our trust, who had sold us out to Oprah, who were planning to sell us out to Netflix, who had a book deal in the works? How could we, in good conscience, have them living in our back garden? And this is where the location is really important. So Frogmore Cottage is right in the heart of the Windsor estate. It's not very far from Adelaide Cottage, where William and Kate subsequently moved. It's not very far from Windsor Castle. Having the Sussexes there would have put them absolutely in the middle of things. And we know there were concerns that they were recording things, that they were seeking to record things. Indeed, we saw things that were recorded of themselves, not recordings of other people, that were included in the Netflix film. So I think from the palace's perspective, the security and trust arguments, which they've never explicitly made, I hasten to add, but that's the sort of briefing that we were given at the time, that this was about security, about trust, really, are not unreasonable. That said, where the Sussex case is very compelling is the absolute scandal that that property has sat there unoccupied for 3 years. And the fact that it's now being renovated again at further expense to turn it back into multiple dwellings. So the Crown Estate, or rather, I should say, the occupied Royal Palaces estate, because under an 1841 Act, Frogmore Cottage is actually annexed for the perpetual use of the sovereign. So it's technically not Crown Estate property. Do keep up at the back there. I mean, frankly, I don't think most people are terribly interested in the distinctions between the Duchy of Lancaster, the Duchy of Cornwall, and the Crown Estate. But, you know, at the end of this is that the taxpayer has got nothing out of this property for 3 years, when they could, I suppose, have been getting rent out of the Sussexes, would be the Sussexes' argument. And I think anyone else's argument was that they could have been getting rent out of somebody else. Now, the palace, to be fair, did try, do you recall, to find someone else to live there. Prince Andrew, well, ex-Prince Andrew, as we must call him. He turned it down. Well, Andrew, regrets, I've had a few. Anyway, look, the thing about Frogmore Cottage is that because of its incredibly, and Frogmore Cottage is in the grounds of Frogmore House, and sometimes the people get confused between the two. But the thing about it is that it's right in the heart of the Windsor estate, so you can't actually just shove it on one of these posh Airbnb type property sharing websites the way they do with a lot of other vacant royal property, right? There is a very limited pool of people you could rent it to, and that pool has got even smaller, since Harry and Meghan left. But here's where it gets really personal and really nasty. So And there's always been a personal element to this because the Sussexes side have always said that Charles, by kicking them out of the house, made it impossible for them to come back, and made it impossible for his grandchildren to get to know him and for him to know his grandchildren. This claim was very resented by the palace, which saw it as a form of emotional blackmail. So there is a personal dynamic to this. But what the Sussex side are telling me now is that King Charles waited until after the Queen had died to kick Harry out. And they say that the Queen would have blocked it because it was her wedding gift to them. Now, it may surprise you to hear that I actually think Harry and Meghan are right about this, because if there was one thing the Queen hated, it was confrontation. And that was arguably one of her greatest weaknesses. Look, her inability to stand up to family members who played the family card to get what they wanted is well known. We saw it with Prince Andrew for decades. We saw it with Harry, of course, when he boasted about those private visits to her. And the Queen was very susceptible to that kind of emotional leverage. And I actually think that the Sussexes are absolutely right in saying that she would never have allowed them to be kicked out of that, because she just wouldn't have had the stomach for that particular fight, I don't think. At the same time, Harry was incredibly naive to think that the royal family would not pull every lever they could, yes, to punish him, or alternatively, to force him into exile. And that is what this is really all about. This is what the security is about. This is what Frogmore Cottage is about. This is what the refusal. Look, even Beatrice and Eugenie have flats in the royal palaces. The reason Harry doesn't is to keep him in exile, to force that exile upon him. It's not necessarily about leaving either. And I think there's an important distinction to be made here. I think that had they left and not then spent the next 5 years chucking rocks at the institution, trying to burn everything down, burn every bridge, I think they would have probably been allowed to keep Frogmore Cottage if they just left, right? And although things were a bit strained at the time, but they hadn't gone public with all their resentments, they hadn't made all the films, they hadn't written the books, they hadn't called the royal family racist, they hadn't said Kate was a cold-hearted B1TCH, they hadn't chucked all these hand grenades into the royal family. I think if they had left that, if they'd been respectful, as they promised the Queen that they would, right, when they left at the Sandringham Summit, I think they may well still be there. I think they were incredibly foolish to expect to keep a grace and favour home. Well, not grace and favour is a bit unfair, because a grace and favour home would be free, but to keep a privileged residential location on the Windsor estate while waging a very public war against the institution. And, equally, right, it's a disgrace that this property has been left completely empty for 3 years, that no value whatsoever has been extracted from it for the taxpayer, given all the nobody comes out of this episode covered in glory, least alone the manager of the royal estates. Somebody should have been living there. And of course, this all speaks to this larger issue, which is this absurdity of the royal property holdings. I mean, William has at least 7 homes by my count. King Charles has something like 20. And as I say, I did do this longer video earlier a few days ago. I got some very nice reviews and some lovely comments from you all. And I know you appreciated it, but we really dived into this ridiculous superfluity of homes that these people have. It's a new twist in an old story, which is basically the grievance of the Sussexes, their sort of assumption that they could just leave and everything would carry on much as it had been before. They could say whatever they liked about the royal family, and they would never complain and never explain, and nothing would happen. I think that it is a disgrace that the house has been left empty for 3 years, but I think that fundamentally, Harry and Meghan actually didn't give the royal family very much choice other than to evict them from the property. Well, all good things must come to an end, and that's it for today. An enormous show, a massive show. thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you to Rachel Passer, our producer, and to Alison Boshoff, our guest. And thank you to you. And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe, please leave a review, please share it with your friends. If you like me, check out my Substack. And if you really like me, please consider showing your support by becoming a member of this channel. We'll see you again next Tuesday. As Queen Elizabeth once said, we will meet again. And as she would no doubt say, looking down on her son from above, God save the King.